Oh, we're here, finally. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Marcus, you're muted, I think. Are you meant to be
Hello
muted?
there.
Hi.
Yeah. All
How are
right.
you? Good morning.
Yes. Welcome, Nihal. All right. Let's begin. After our talk last week on trademark, today, right now, we are traveling across half of the world, across the globe, to Middle East. So we have our speaker from UAE, United Arab Emirates, who will be giving us insights on how to protect your IP, patent, trademark, copyright, industrial design, and so on in the Middle East. So before we begin, let's do a sound check. Can every one of you, this is our SOP, yeah, our webinar SOP, can you hear and see us clearly? If yes, click the raise hand button. Let me see your hands right here. Raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. No, not for Nihao. All right, nice. Okay. So for those of you, if you have friends or colleagues who haven't registered for the talk, yeah, please share this screen to them. Scan our QR code to visit our Facebook because this webinar is currently live. And if they would like to join the Zoom webinar in which they can post their questions and get answered, key in this webinar ID and passcode to join, yeah? Please do it now. If you have friends who would like to listen to this webinar, share this to them. Okay, time's up. Nice. Okay. Okay, since everyone can hear and see us clearly, let me introduce to you our speaker today. Can you see her? This is Ms. Nihal Othman from Abu Najah Intellectual Property. She heads the operations team and she's also the associate director at the IP firm. So Ms. Nihal, she graduated from Edinburgh Business School all the way from the UK, and then she traveled all the way again to New York to Hull International Business School to complete her MBA. So Ms. Nihal, she has been doing a lot of things with regards to digitalization of IP services, you know, and then to promote company formations, international partnerships, and so on and so forth. So it's been quite, you know, she's been quite active in this arena. And in her profile, I see something really funny that I want to share. She spent her days trying to make her teammates drink more water and her night trying to be a chef. So I presume you're a good cook, right, Ms. Nihal?
I really try to be. I mean, you know, fake it till you make it. You know what they say. So, so far, I mean, it's okay. No one has been ended up in the emergency room yet, so we're good to go.
So is it really hot there? How's the weather that you have to make them drink so much water?
Well, no, I make them drink a lot of water because I hardly ever see them hydrating. But that is besides the point that technically we do live in a desert. Okay, we do live in a desert-like ecosystem. So it gets really hot during the summer. And it's not just the heat that really gets to you here, it's the humidity. It's insane. So the things I have to do to my hair for it to stay down are insane. So anyway, the weather here is quite hot, but then again, each and every place you walk into is air conditioned anyway, so you hardly ever feel it. You know, as a country, people basically adapt. You have to adapt. So basically, that's it.
I see. So girls out there, drink more water to let your hair down, yeah?
Exactly. Your skin, please.
Yeah. So before we start, Ms. Nihal, I have a provoking question. Okay, this is from our personal experience, yeah. Among the Middle East countries, yeah, UAE is one of the most expensive countries to register your IP in. Why is that so? Why is it so expensive? Is there a particular reason for that?
Look, so technically, there is no particular reason. Okay, I want to talk about standing of the United Arab Emirates when we talk about its fellow countries within the GCC Council. Okay, it is the most advancing out of all. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
as a governmental entity, it does spend a lot of expenditure on making sure that everything does go on point. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so with that kind of level of infrastructure and systemization, they also need to have some kind of revenue because the United Arab Emirates is known for the quality. Initially, high fees are not just regarded for the sense of it being expensive. It's also because it's one of the most efficient registration systems on a worldwide level when you want to compare it to other, let's say, Middle Eastern countries, okay? The
Mm-hmm.
level of integration of technology was something as simple as, let's say, filing for a trademark is so advanced that the price really is justified in a way. And by the way, I have heard that question so many times from people, especially if they're new entrants to the market, whether they have a brand or even an entire like conglomerate or an entire IP portfolio. It usually is justified once they see how quickly things are expedited and how easy their life becomes when it comes to anything to do with IP.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how I would personally justify it. True, I do agree with you. The difference between prices is very significant. Well, not very significant, but notably significant when it comes to, let's say, countries like Saudi Arabia or Oman or maybe Bahrain. But then again, I can personally justify it by the quality of service you get when you are dealing with governmental entities like the patent and trademark offices over here. And by the way, FYI, very recently, just to facilitate the ability of new market entrants to, let's say, protect their IP, there
Mm-hmm.
was around a 20% decrease on all of the entire IP services that is offered by all of the
Decrease, you
governmental
mean? You mean went
decrease,
down?
went down, yeah.
Okay.
So if you actually
20%.
compare the prices, let's say 2019, just official fees versus the ones you have now, you will see a very significant decrease in the official fees for any kind of IP related service that is
Mm-hmm.
directly, obviously, with the governmental entity.
Okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ms. Nihal. Very soon, Ms. Nihal will be sharing with us the developments of digitalization of IP services over there, their legislative updates and the trends, as well as some cultural and linguistic barriers and how you could overcome them. And finally, emerging opportunities in the Middle East. Yeah. So, Ms. Nihal, the floor is yours. Could you please begin your talk?
Definitely, 100%. Just quickly, for everyone who's listening, thank you so much for making the time out of your day to listen to what I have to say. I really appreciate it, and I'll make sure that whatever information I give you is as comprehensive as possible. And on a final note, Dr. Marcus, thank you so much for hosting me. At any point, if you have any lingering questions, please, by all means, stop me and I will attend to whatever queries you have. So I'm going to begin right now, okay?
It's our pleasure to have you.
Amazing, thank you so much. Perfect, so our topic today is basically the digitalization of the way IP works in the MENA region. So I'm going to be a little maybe specific when I'm talking about this certain area because all of the legislations over here are somewhat tied together, but I would like to also touch point on the United Arab Emirates because in my opinion, and I promise you it is a very unbiased opinion, it has taken the leap forward in digitalization of such services because until very recently, it was it was actually the other way around, okay? So I'm going to be basically covering three main points when it comes to this kind of topic. So we're going to be talking about digitalization. I'm also going to be talking about legislation. And again, like Dr. Marcus said, I'm going to be talking about realities and opportunities. Okay. Now, to tackle my first point, I'm going to be talking about industries who set up shop on the online arena to cope with the current lockdown, which I'm pretty sure we have all experienced due to COVID-19. Okay, and I'm pretty sure that we are all very familiar with necessity is the mother of invention. Okay, and during this time of caution and isolation, a lot of industries were unfortunately and fortunately forced to employ creative solutions so that their needs are catered during such a critical time. And one of the main notions that they have turned towards is digitalization. And this is not only governmental entities like the Patent and Trademark Office, but I am talking about the economy as a whole, okay? So I want to quickly touch upon how IP worked before this certain period and the changes that have actually been implemented or are being implemented right now to make sure that, God forbid, in the future, if we are to experience such we would like to call it, we are basically prepared or maybe 10 steps ahead. So, for example, before COVID-19, okay, some jurisdictions in GCC already did have the option, for example, to e-register for services for IP, okay? Some of them did not. Now, once we have entered this, let's say, period of mutual global lockdown, it did come to the governmental entities' attention that the ones that did have any sort of online digitalization or facilitation to get services done online were the ones who were going ahead, and the ones that were sticking to their old school ways of doing things and not really strategizing for the future kind of saw that we're falling behind, okay? Us as a law firm, as an IP firm, also felt the sting of this because despite the fact that we have an international clientele, for example, if it is in a country, if I had to, for example, register a trademark in a country where it was completely offline and where physical presence was required, all work was completely hindered. It was put to a complete halt, okay? So you can imagine the financial repercussions that they had to go through, be it from the client side or be it for our side, as an agent to register such, and also the ministerial entity that does the official registration and basically embraces the entire process of the actual registration, okay? Now this was during, and this is the, like I said, it was a tough time, but it was a wake-up call. Now now that things are hopefully kind of going back to normal, okay, which we all would like to call the new normal, okay, everyone now are starting to implement some form or another of digitalization, and I'm going to be strictly speaking about IP services and actually bringing forth your IP requirements on online platforms, okay? So I want to talk about just a very interesting statistic that I came across while I was doing my research, okay? So 41%, or let's say 86 out of 209 listed countries already offered e-registration services for IP under the Madrid Protocol by 2018. But the latter is that a huge chunk of these are not, unfortunately, in the Middle East. Therefore, after this little sting, a lot has been implemented now to make sure that, then again, like I just said, that they are 10 steps ahead should we ever go through a similar situation. Okay? One moment. So perfect. So despite having private IP firms and practitioners with digital systems, the processes are still dependent on governmental offices. Therefore, and the countries hit the most during the first 2 quarters, services were put on hold. Like I said, clients' requirements were put on hold. IP firms were not able to facilitate what their clients wanted. And then again, the patent and trademark offices weren't really readily available to receive such an influx of requests for their services, okay? Now, I would like to put UAE quickly on the map right now because I want to talk about how they were one of the most prepared during this current time. So private firms are basically at the forefront of offering online services because digitization and digitalization is really at the core of most operations that are in the UAE, regardless of what industry you're in, okay? Now, people are looking at efficiency. People are looking at cutting costs. People are also looking at making things happen faster and with a higher level of accuracy, okay? So this is the part of the drive that makes electronic registration the new normal in terms of the IP sector in the Middle East, okay? So moving forward, I'd like to quickly touch upon a few legislative updates that, to me at least, serve as highlights, okay? So when it comes to the GCC Patent Office, it has now officially begun to maintain open communications through its website. So it has actually taken its system to another level where you don't physically, technically need to be there. You can now speak to whoever is concerned with whatever query you may have through their website, okay? Then to move to another example, which was the UAE government or the Patent and Trademark Office that actually handles all of these inquiries. So their response to this pandemic as well was just as important of an update from the previous year. By that, I mean, they were already 10 steps ahead that they wanted to incorporate maybe zero human interaction when it comes to people sending inquiries in by the application of artificial intelligence, okay? Now coming to Saudi Arabia, that I would also, it was a very, very notable example for me, that Saudi Arabia awarded the first stamp mark and has recently joined the Budapest Treaty in the last week of August, I believe. So that was a very, very, because I'm not sure of who's aware and who's not, but Saudi Arabia as a country is generally very conservative when it comes to its laws and legislations, being that it is a country based on Sharia law, okay? So just the fact that it would willingly want to be affiliated with the Budapest Treaty very recently is, I mean, it would be a big deal to me because I see how things work, and in front of my eyes, I see certain, what is the word? I see certain jumps and leaps to bettering the way things are done, okay? So let me quickly, moving on now, I'd like to also move on. During the pandemic or the lockdown for the UAE, for example, a very interesting that happened is there was absolutely no exceptions given for deadlines. That's one thing. This is how confident they were that their online system, despite that there was almost zero human intervention, they were so confident that all of the work was going to flow as usual, even without human intervention, okay? And even appointed trademark opposition hearings continued. How? Through Zoom meetings. I mean, you wouldn't really think that a governmental entity would be comfortable enough to perhaps give a third-party service such as Zoom access to such confidential hearings such as trademark oppositions, but they actually did that through very, very stringent privacy policies made especially with the Zoom enterprise. for the UAE government, then this is not just appointed trademark opposition and hearings, it is also for anything to do with prosecutions and litigation. All right? So,
Nihal, are you sharing your screen?
would you like me to share my screen?
Yep.
Would you like me to share my screen?
No, if it's relevant to sharing your screen, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll share my screen. I will share my screen once it is when I get to the facts and figures and the graphs.
Okay. All right.
I think it would be more visual, but if you would like, I'm more than happy to do so.
It's just a reminder.
No,
okay.
All would you like me to?
Up to your content.
Okay, perfect. When I get to the part of the visuals, because these are just my notes,
yeah,
I definitely will be doing that. Have you granted me access to share my screen? Yes, you did actually, yeah. So we will move to that in about 5 to 7 minutes. How does that sound? Perfect? Amazing. Amazing.
No, I'm just afraid that you forgot.
So no, don't worry. I will not forget.
All right, great.
Another thing that continued during this pandemic is that our notary public was still moving on at full throttle. Even power of attorney filing did continue, and even urgent proceedings went on schedule through remote consideration. So all of these measures taken during such a critical time where it is literally a life or death situation, everything went on as usual, and that kind of operation was taken as a standard or a benchmark for our fellow countries within the GCC, basically the Gulf Country Council, and that is about it. So I'm going to be sharing my screen now, okay? I'm going to also be touching upon the visions that are to come, and I'm also going to be talking about IP figures, okay? Once we're done with that, the final part will be talking about emerging opportunities in our sector. So Dr. Marcus, I'm going to be sharing my screen in exactly 2 seconds. Okay. So I will not be on our Zoom window right now. So if you have anything at any point, just stop me. Okay.
Yeah. If you have any questions, you can type in the Q&A box. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. One moment. Okay, perfect. So, Dr. Marcus, all good now? Yes?
Yep. We see your screen.
Exactly. So we are now going to be talking about not the pertinent provisions. We are going to be talking about the IP complaints. Now, recent developments after all of these new implementations and how the IP system or ecosystem works, we have seen amazing drops in, let's say, the complaints or maybe people's suggestions or just people's recommendations, and basically that's it. One moment. Yeah, this is exactly where I wanted to go. Let me just put this in full screen. Pertinent overall. Okay, so I would like to talk about the overall value of IP in general, especially in the GCC region. Okay, so I'm just looking at this number now, and we're talking about 520 billion US dollars with the KSA contributing to almost 53% of the GDP, followed by the UAE, which is at 20.56%. If you would like to look at that number and kind of cross-reference it with the actual GDP of a country, and knowing that it's purely from IP gives you enough idea at how integral IP is for any country's economy, okay? And the patent, the patent registration has taken such a surge. As you can see the numbers in front of you, which is basically 3,000 plus and 1,000 plus in the UAE. The UAE and the KSA heavily rely on import and export. And for such inventions to actually be introduced into regions that would have a stigma or a socio-cultural stigma of it being unpenetrable is amazing, just by the fact that people feel comfortable enough that they have mediums to actually enter these new markets. All right. Now, I would also like to talk about the applications of education and academic institutions that are monetizing their research and development. Okay, I'm sorry, I think I need to put this on full screen. Just one moment. I cannot do that. Oh, I need to do that on my actual, excuse me, everyone. I just need a moment. Yeah, I need to go over here. Yeah, I will need to stop sharing for a moment if you don't mind, because I would really like to maximize this to give everyone the entire screen share. One moment.
All right, that's fine.
One moment. F5, yeah. I think it's the ratio of the screen, guys. It's the ratio of the screen. There's nothing I can do about it. Oh, oh. Okay, cool, got it. Chrissy, it won't be possible. It's the ratio of the screen. It's fine, perfectly fine. Yes, apologies for the delay. I am just going to tune back in. We're almost done. Okay, and I'm going to be sharing my screen again. Okay, perfect. So I would really like to talk about, one moment. Besides the fact that everyone is moving to a complete shift of digitalization, again, and not just in the IP industry, but also in the digitalization of spreading awareness and education about the importance of IP and the repercussions of not applying it to your business or to whatever it is that brings you money, okay, and whatever it is that would have a potential end user. A lot of institutions here, regardless of the country, but I'm talking about the GCC as a whole, is that they're having amazing initiatives with, let's say, IP firms like ourselves or other established law firms in the region to educate upcoming and budding entrepreneurs or inventors or even brand owners and business people to monetize through research and development, and to also educate as to what kind of protection suits them best in terms of the kind of IP that they have, because it can be very confusing. I'll give you a very interesting example. Just because due to the lack of education or information or misinformation, we have actually had people coming in with drawings of a potential invention wanting to patent it immediately, and unbeknown to them, they should understand that something such as patenting is a long and intricate process that has so many different stages, so many different fees, and so many different requirements. But then again, when you voice yourself in that way, it's obviously intimidating, especially for anyone trying to educate themselves about that. A lot of legal jargon has also been used, and then again, contributing to how intimidating it is. So this is why a lot of academic institutions here that foster creatives and foster people who have, the youth especially, who would love to get into such industries, we need to let them know that they need to get their backs covered, because in the time we live in, IP theft is probably one of the most unspoken about issues, and this is what are the current institutions are taking certain initiatives to go ahead and educate their peers, even when it comes to the people who do the actual teaching and the people who are, let's say, really interested in getting into these industries, okay? Another thing is that, again, I'm going to touch upon Saudi Arabia, because very recently, again, as I mentioned, they're seeing a surge of interest in not only trademarks and copyrights and design, but mainly patents. If we would like to look at the statistics of last year and this year, now let's talk about, let's say, the last 5 years, okay, and then the last 2 years, you will see a significant increase. And this is because Saudi Arabia as a country has been flourishing and really trying to, they're really trying to attract and remove any kind of negative stigma that it may have due to the media and the way it has been portrayed, when it's actually the complete opposite of how it actually is portrayed online. Okay, perfect. So I'm moving on to the next slide. Okay. Now I would like to talk about 5 main things that I feel, or we feel, are significant gaps that would need tackling, okay? Whether we would get help from outside our region, or maybe take it in as a personal mission to make sure that these are rectified. First of all, I just spoke about awareness. The lack of knowledge about IP doesn't just come with being uninformed, it comes with very, very, very high repercussions. And these repercussions are usually financial, okay? It is only when someone realizes that their IP is being infringed or stolen that they only start educating themselves about the importance of integrating intellectual property into your business strategy as a whole. So whenever anyone is setting up a business, one of the main things that they need to forecast, besides their finances, besides their, let's say, their recruitment strategies or their marketing strategies, they must have an IP strategy. Because there are a lot of entities over here that, one moment, I'm getting my, sorry. Again, sorry to cut you off. Yes. Yeah. So again, we were talking about awareness. So integrating an IP strategy, I believe, is one of the most fundamental things when it comes to setting up shop in any industry, regardless of where you are, and this is not only limited to the United Arab Emirates, okay? Another thing that people have noticed, especially our international clientele who have dealt with other patent and trademark offices who are not within the Middle Eastern and North African region, are the processing times. Regardless of whether we're talking about patents, trademarks, copyright, or design, it does take quite some time. And this is even the best case scenario when we don't face any kind of oppositions or any lapses or whatever it may be. So for example, the average time for someone to receive their final trademark certification could take up to a year in some entities, from, let's say, 6 months and up to a year. And I'm pretty sure, logically speaking, that certain strategies could be implemented to ensure that such processing times are reduced. Not just for the sake of not having patience or being impatient of wanting things to come up, but the more efficient these processes are enhanced, I think they would be able to actually process a lot of more requests and requirements in the same period of time, okay? And then I'm going to go to the part of cost. I think, Dr. Marcus, you posed this in the beginning. Why is it so expensive? Why is it so expensive? Okay. Given that, I'm going to assume that a lot of people here have an idea of what it is like to go through the entire process, but it is justified in certain places due to the quality. But unfortunately, high cost is one of the main reasons why people opt out of not registering or protecting their IP. Our duty as a law firm is to, for example, facilitate their ability to pay through, let's say, be it installments or be it complimentary consultation. But then again, you would want to fix this at the root, which is basically the final entity, which would be the governmental patent and trademark offices, okay? Before COVID, talking about strategy, there was really none, unfortunately, but as of now, things are getting very systemized. And as me personally, because I deal with governmental entities, I have seen an amazing leap from in a span of, let's say, 6 months. So hopefully, if anyone did have the pleasure of dealing with these entities, you would see a significant difference in the way matters have been handled. And the final thing, language barrier. This would be my least of a concern, but I did have to bring this up because I did get a lot of questions. They tell me, Nihal, we don't speak Arabic. How could we even begin to do that? It is perfectly fine. Even if you give me any kind of trademark registrations or filing, and give me a very exotic language in Mandarin, I could I could definitely assure you that we have all kinds of legal translations. Even though it is in Arabic, we will definitely ensure that the language barriers is never there. Wait, okay. So let's talk about emerging opportunities. Again, I am going to be talking about, in my personal opinion, the four most important aspects to where we could bridge such gaps. Digitalization. Now, we do have the idea of wanting to go there, but the, let's say, the tremendous at which new technologies are emerging every day needs to be gapped through better marketing channels. There might be a solution that is, let's say, on a completely different continent, but people need to take the right channels to introduce these technologies that could be implemented to make things better, okay? I also want to talk about the fintech industry. True, the tech industry on a worldwide level is growing to be it's the future basically, okay? So getting these technologies and trying to introduce them, and I'm talking on a general sense, introducing them into the way things work or the framework of the IP industry in the GCC is also one of the greatest ideas. I think I'm personally just waiting for someone to take the lead and bring the solution to the table, okay? Now, funding partners. Application fees are funding agencies just to facilitate, let's say, a startup's ability to into their sourcing code or even their industrial design or whatever it may be. And there also seems to be a lack of support. It's like I would like to call it after sales support. Once you get your trademark or get your certificate at any point in time, what next? I personally feel that we should be able to bridge such gaps basically. So that would basically be the gaps I see that require attention, okay? So to completely sign off right now, we did have, like, I was speaking with my team while we were trying to get the best information to share with you, but the new normal is here, right? So we really do need to face these challenges as a global community, and we need to join forces because, in my personal opinion, forming such partnerships is basically going to make us or break us, and it would be basically the next great leap. So with that being said, I understand that my talk has been somewhat general, but this is from my personal opinion. And I wanted just to conclude and to give you an example of such a partnership is I recently came across this incredible entity here in the United Arab Emirates. Okay, it is called the Arab Brazilian Chamber of Commerce. So what they basically do is, despite the fact that they have nothing to do with our region per se, and they are in South America, they are basically trying to bridge such gaps that I have just mentioned. And we have actively partnered with them just to help, let's say, new entrants trying to penetrate the MENA region market through pragmatic and honest and accurate information. And FYI, 75% of the inquiries I get are purely about intellectual property. So this can even give you an idea that these gaps are not just within our region, it's kind of a worldwide issue that we really need to tackle. So with that being said, I would really, really like to thank everyone who has made their time to listen to me. And I think right now I'm going to stop my screen share because I was unable to see if there were any questions on the side. So one moment.
All right, thank you, Ms. Nihal. I agree with you. We have to join hands in these difficult times of COVID. Yeah, that's why we have this kind of thought. Many of us are realizing the importance of doing, virtual meetings, virtual talks like this. So yeah, and you've spoken about the awareness in terms of the realities in the IP industry, right? So it's the same scenario here over here in Southeast Asia, especially Malaysia, where we are, where the awareness is still low. Many business owners, they have like really good ideas and creative stuff, but they don't know how to actually market and protect them. So do you have many talks like this? Because this talk is meant to be like educational, about sharing. Do you have many talks like this over there in the Middle East?
We actually do, but the thing is, I only have these talks with people who know what intellectual property is, because this is one of the main subjects that I could go on and on and on about. Like, if we did not have 40 minutes today, you would all be spending your entire day in front of your screen, because I have a lot to say about this subject. I'll give you an example really quickly, and especially when it comes to our main topic of this conversation, which is digitalization, okay? Right now, we did want to speak about the patent offices the patent and trademark offices and what they faced as issues in terms of their entire operation. I want to touch about the major issues I faced in my firm and how little time I had to basically make sure that this does not end up with me shutting down. It was that bad. So again, what we did was complete digitalization. But thankfully, because we have an amazing managing director, we've actually begun our digitalization plan in 2017. So if it wasn't for his vision, and if it wasn't for everything being electronically there, we are absolutely paperless as an IP firm, which is quite difficult to fathom, but that is the truth of it. And paperless is because all of our databases are on our server. And if it wasn't for this, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here talking to you in this office. So it's just about forecasting what you may or may not be going through and just being 10 steps ahead. And this would apply in every single aspect of life. It's a very generalized thing. Forecasting the worst situation possible and making sure that you have not one, not two, not three, but maybe 4 outs, 4 solutions, 4 plans, just in case there's something that you did not predict or forecast in advance.
Okay. And believe me, there are actually people who are keen to register their IP in the Middle East, right?
I understand.
And many of them don't know how. So fortunately, we have this thing called Gulf Cooperation Council. So this, although it doesn't cover the entire Middle East, at least it covers the Arab states of the 6 states of Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and
no longer Qatar, by the way. Qatar is no longer a part of it.
No longer there. Oh, so in this sense, how does it work? So is it a centralized registration system over there? Like if you were to apply patent or trademark with the GCC, so when it is approved, is it enforceable like throughout the countries over there in the GCC?
Okay, perfect. Okay, let me quickly tell you about that, because Yeah, there is a way things work when it comes to this.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a centralized GCC patent office. That means you can collectively register one patent in all of these countries, but this only applies to patents, okay?
Okay.
And it also very much depends on the nature of the patent. For example, if it is a design patent, then it would not fit the requirements. You will have to do it individually. But then again, every situation has its own requirements. But when we're talking about trademarks, you will not be able to collectively register them. You're going to have to register them separately and approach each and every country on its own as its own standalone entity.
Why does GCC not cover trademark? I mean,
it does cover trademark, it does, but you cannot collectively register it such as patents. Like one registration would cover the entire GCC Council if it meets a certain set of requirements. But if you would like to register your trademark, and let's say all of the GCC countries, then you will have to do it individually. So for the UAE, you're gonna have to go, and that's a separate application. For Bahrain, that's a separate application. For, let's say, for Kuwait and so on, that's a separate application. But for the GCC Patent Office, if your patent application meets a certain set of requirements, then it is basically one application that will be applicable on all of the 6 countries.
Okay.
So it's all a matter of the requirements and the nature of the patent that you have on hand of the documentation.
Okay, so it's collective, GCC is collective for patent, but not trademark and...
Not for any other IP service. And by the way, this is provisional. It doesn't all, the GCC collective registration doesn't apply to all of them. It will have to be assessed first before it is even approved for a collective registration. Of course, it's much more time efficient, but there is, these are their provisions basically.
So is there an intention to expand the function of GCC to cover those other IP branches, or would there be another body to do that? Organizational body?
Well, as of now, I don't think there are talks, to be honest. I'll tell you what, Dr. Marcus. Right now, their main strategy or their main goal is to avoid this situation happen again. Okay, so they're all joining forces. This is why I bring up tech. If anyone here watching feels that they have a solution that they could bring forth that would gap all of these issues that I have just discussed, by all means, because they're always looking for brilliant ways to make things more efficient. They are trying to put themselves on the map when it comes to systemizing the way things work, be it digital, or even if you have any kind of human interaction, or even with the application of artificial intelligence. So they're willing to consider everything, because the reality of it, when we're talking about the IP industry, the West really is at the forefront, because all of these technologies are born in the region. So given the fact that, okay, the tech sector is emerging in this region at crazy speeds, it will take them at least another 10 years to be where they really want to be. So outside facilitation, overseas facilitation will also be very, very important. So that's another emerging opportunity, by the way, helping make things easier and faster and cheaper.
Okay, so if we have a client who would want to, enter into Middle East, for example, exporting their product. Okay, no bias to UAE first, yeah. So which Middle East?
Whatsoever. I'm gonna give a very generalized. I'm using UAE as an example. It's because 95% of the way things work are standardized. That is why it's called the council, by the way. Because it's all standardized. So there wouldn't be any rule of thumbs that would have heavy differences between all of these countries.
All right. So we have if we have people who want to export their products to the Middle East, yeah, which country would you recommend to go in first?
Well, it depends on what country, because all of these countries have their own ports. So if they
Okay.
want to enter
Economically, market wise.
market-wise, no, look, it depends. It's all specific to the country. I'll give
Mm-hmm.
you two examples, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the simplest example I can give you. And it
Uh-huh.
will basically depend on the type of the product,
Uh-huh.
okay?
Uh-huh.
And the characteristics of it, and which country, and whether it would allow it to begin with,
Uh-huh.
okay? And if there is an actual need for it, because usually they won't even let you export if there is an oversaturation of a certain product, by the way. This is a new legislation that has been set in place. Oversaturation of, let's say, cornflakes. Okay, we haven't taken cornflakes right now. If you have 10 brands of cornflakes and they tell you our quota for cornflakes, you're not allowed to get your cornflakes. I'm sorry, you know
I
what I
think
mean?
I think some people don't know this. So, which country has the highest purchasing power or riches over there?
I would say Saudi Arabia. I
Saudi
would say
Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. You mean consumer-wise?
Yeah, consumer-wise,
Consumer-wise.
yes,
And
yes.
the only way you could say this is looking at the country with the highest population, which would have the highest. But Saudi Arabia is probably one of the most highly populated countries in the MENA region. Maybe after that, we can start talking about Egypt. Egypt has a very high population. Therefore, in terms of consumerism and spending rates, that will be it. So that will be directly related to their population and their demographic. Okay, but if you want to talk about actual import and export, there are no restrictions. The only time you need to think about loopholes is when the type of product isn't usually very welcomed as per Sharia law. For example, alcoholic beverages. Okay, Saudi Arabia does not at all entertain the imports of alcoholic beverages. But, since
Right.
neighboring countries, like let's say that shares borders with like Bahrain or the United Arab Emirates, do grant these licenses to new business owners, then again, it's not legal, by the way, do not get me wrong, okay, but they
Okay.
do find loopholes to get these products into these countries because there will always be a market for it. But please don't do it, okay? Just don't do it. This is what I mean. Each and every country, depending on what you're trying to import and export, all have very, very feasible abilities, whether you're inside the country or outside. It all depends on doing your due diligence beforehand and knowing which port would be best for you, depending on which country you want to operate in, and making sure that you have all of your documentations from the hosting country in place.
Okay, so we can still find alcohols there.
Please
And
don't do that, please. Because it is not tolerated. They have zero tolerance.
all right.
Zero tolerance when it comes to that kind of thing.
Okay, so one of the major concern is also language barrier. So if we'd like to, file an application like patents or trademark into the Middle East, any of the countries, yeah, how does it go? Is English accepted, or we have to translate it into the Arabic and then file into the GCC or UAE, for example?
A patent application, regardless of what the language is, just as long as it's technically correct, especially if it's in English, it's perfectly fine. But there will always be a requirement for all of these documentations to undergo legal translation that is accredited by whatever entity that takes care of it. So even if you would like to submit any kind of application in a certain language, it would have the requirement of having a legally translated document, because once it gets to the examination stage, and while they are even cross-referencing for any identical or similar patents that currently exist, they will need to cross-check certain terminologies and languages. So to make sure that they do come up with the best decision when it comes to either granting someone a patent or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. So even
But
if
these services
English
are
is
very
accepted,
available, yeah, and they're very readily available and they're very easy to access. And by the way, they're not expensive. They're cost efficient because there are a lot of them. It's just a matter of finding the perfect person who gets, let's say, the industry in, whether it's like medtech or biotech or like automotive, just knowing who is an expert in your field so that you would get the most out of the actual legal translation.
okay. So we can actually submit the English version first and then get it legally translated.
100%, 100%. But then again, I'm telling you, it is best to do your due diligence before you even pick that service because there is nothing in common between automotive and mechanical engineering and biotech. Okay, so it's always good
Exactly.
to deal with, let's say, legal translation that is more versed with the technicalities of your industry and the language of the original documents.
What about trademark? Like, for example, if there are Chinese clients and then they have their mark, you see, in Chinese words. So to enter Middle East, what should they do?
Well, obviously, the Chinese word would also have a transliteral meaning, correct?
Yes, transliterate.
Okay, so for example, I'm trying to think of a mark that's Chinese but also has an English term. I'm sure it does. It's never just Chinese, okay? Or even the way you pronounce it in Chinese is written in English, okay? So usually, I'm sure you know, marks could either be registered as words or logos or a combination of both.
Yes.
In that case, just to make life easier for everyone, they would basically register it as a whole. But there will have to be some kind of, let's say, indication as to what this actually is. Because even if there isn't an indication, it will make things harder for your trademark attorney, let's say, in the Middle East, to know, for example, which classification this should fall under. So whatever mark it should be, it should indicate to a certain extent, whether visually or through by words, how it is. But so I don't technically need the translation as long as I know what industry this falls under, so I can properly place it under the classification. Because as you know, when I register a trademark, I don't register that. It has nothing to do with the service or the quality of service. It's basically only your brand. So if people will resonate with this certain Chinese calligraphy, then this is your brand.
Okay.
But me as an Arab, I wouldn't really know what it means. So for me, it would be a logo. You know, this is how a brain would work. But I would need something that I can relate to in a certain level of English. But technically, there is no translation required in that sense.
Okay, so it can go in as a logo, the character, but the name of the brand doesn't have to be translated into Arabic, for example. Is that what you mean?
Not necessarily, and I'll
as
be
long as
very
there's
honest
indication.
with Dr. Marcus. Like I personally have not come across such intricate situations, but it's usually a very easy feat because there are always ways around it. And it also depends on whether, for example, the client wants the way you pronounce your brand to be there. It's basically literally a language barrier, or if he's just wanting to trademark it for the sake of pure protection and not branding, then that's a completely different case. So it all depends on what the client is looking for and what he's trying to get protected from.
But if there is an English name, it should be sufficient, right? Because most of the people there, they should be literate.
That is 100%. That is 100%. But whenever there is a requirement that we do have an English translation, sorry, an Arabic translation, it's a 2-second thing. We usually do that on our behalf if there is a requirement and if the word is in English. And since we basically register the whole mark, it is not necessarily the case. But if the requirement does arise, it is a 2-second ordeal not even an ordeal. You know what I mean? So translation is not at all an issue that you should ever think of, because these services are readily available whether they are a requirement or not. Exactly.
Okay, understood. Last question, Nihao. Money. Just now you talk about application fees are funded by different agencies, right?
Yes.
I mean over there because it's expensive.
And I'll tell you how. I'll tell you why I mentioned.
Yeah. Does it cover international clients, and what are the opportunities for funding?
Our opportunities for funding is if your concept is worth the investment. It's as simple as that. There are a lot of funding entities here, or maybe like incubators, accelerators. And this mainly, by the way, applies to startups and even startups that are even already established, by the way. But then again, when we're talking about, let's say, registering in bulk, like if we have 20 products under their brand, that will be quite expensive. And investors, one of the first things an investor will ask you about if they are even considering to invest is not just how much money you're willing to generate for them, but they're also going to ask you about your IP portfolio. So without an IP portfolio, there's a 75% chance that you will lose this investor's potential in giving you their money. So just for that sense, if a certain hedge fund feels that there is a lot of potential with you, why wouldn't they facilitate funding and getting your IP protected? For us, like for example, as an Abu Najah intellectual property, true, we do work with giant conglomerates all over the world, but we are also fortunate enough to be exposed to amazing startups and brilliant young minds who, let's say, would have a capital, but would rather use this capital in furthering their startup rather than spending it on their registration. So it is technically our civic duty to help them with this, because we as a firm have the capital to, let's say, pay upfront and, let's say, give them easier payment plans. I mean, it is the least we can do to help them progress. You know what I mean?
So you have payment plans there installed for them. I mean, does it happen for most of the firms or what?
Everything is purely situational. The way we work here in our firm is not like, hi, I want to register my trademark, here are the fees, send me instructions, done. No, everything, we take client servicing very seriously here. And I wouldn't even call it client servicing. It's just the entire experience from the first moment we initiate contact with a potential partner or a client until they are basically a running $5 billion industry, okay? We look at ourselves as their partners. So if they grow, we grow. So like I said, we would have the capital to support them. And as a rule of thumb, these kind of people would never forget who was with them in their beginning. Okay, so this is not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking at monetizing off of their intellect. I am here to monetize off my long-term partnerships with people. Again, everything is purely situational. I can register in bulk for very, very big entities, or I can give people custom-made consultations for their needs, and we work around their means and not around our means. So this is basically the core of our operation.
Great. All right. Okay, so we have seen many kinds of opportunities over there in the Middle East, and Abu Najah Intellectual Property will be very, very, very in pleasure to help us. Am I right? Yeah.
100%.
So,
by the way, I'm looking at the questions here. Wait, first of all, could we have copies of your slides? 100%. I'm going to be sharing them with Dr. Chi, and whoever wants access to them, by all means, Dr. Chi, this was actually made for you. So by all means, feel free to use it. Qatar is still officially a member and part of GCC. I believe that it is. I believe that it is not. I believe that it is not. but I'm not quite sure. I may be misinformed, but I will have to check. Because by the way, me personally, I'm not a person who delves into politics. The only time I hear Qatar in the news is that they're not talking to each other anymore. They don't want to deal with them anymore. But then I might have been misinformed with that regard, and thank you so much for correcting me. I really appreciate it. By the way, the name doesn't quite show. Mr. Khalid Bashir. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Khalid Bashir, for clarifying this for me. Mr. Mr. Wahid Paksaman, what is the GCC? The GCC is the group of countries if you were referring to the entire talk. So it's basically the Gulf Council cooperation that basically consists of United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, Kuwait, and then Qatar. Okay. And
so finally, is Qatar still in GCC? Like
apparently it is, because apparently I was under the complete impression that it was no longer a part of it, because there are a lot of ties that are completely severed, by the way. But
that's a political issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a person that's fully into politics, but the thing is, whenever they do see, I hear of Qatar in the news, it's usually, unfortunately, not the most positive, despite Qatar being such an advanced country with a lot to give in terms of economy and commerce as well, by the way.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Nihal. We've come to an end. Any other questions, final questions from the participants in Zoom or in LinkedIn platform?
And if, by the way, if there are any lingering questions, my details are with Dr. Marcus. I'm very happy to, at all, if you ever require, have a one-on-one session with you. And I think that's about it. I think Chris is trying to tell me something.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Nihal. It's our great pleasure to have you with us this morning. It's afternoon in Malaysia, 4:09 p.m. We are coming to the end of this talk, and upcoming, we have another talk in Indonesia. We are bringing you back into the ASEAN region. How to protect your IP in Indonesia, and it's happening on the 18th of September, next Friday, 11 a.m. Kuala Lumpur time and 10 a.m. Jakarta time. Yeah, so you can check out our Facebook page here or scan the QR code for more information, because the poster is already up and it's your time to register. Yeah, so once again, thank you very much. Thank you very much to our speaker, Ms. Nihal.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
And by the way, honorable mention, by the way, to Mr. Khalid, who actually pointed out that Qatar does still remain a member. Thank you so much for informing me. I really appreciate it. So, and for everyone else who has made the time out of their day to graciously listen to what I have to say, I really appreciate it. And with that being said, our doors are always open through us or through Dr. Marcus. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. And I wish you all safety, and very soon have a lovely weekend.
Yeah, and thank you very much to the attendees. Wish you all a nice day. Yeah.
Perfect.
See ya. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.